progress that's being made thus far, and so I will not offer an amendment this year because I think at least we've started in the right direction on this program, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for unanimous consent to consider my amendment at this point in the reading.
Is there objection? No objection. The clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Kravac of Minnesota, page 15, line 23, after the dollar amount insert increased by $10 million, reduced by $10 million.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer an amendment to the fiscal year 2013 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill to increase the funding for federal flight deck officers, or the FFDO program. This amendment is fully offset, costing the taxpayers no additional money. This amendment is also supported by the National Rifle Association. Mr. Chairman, 9/11 woke us up. The reality is that we live in a very dangerous world with varied and morphing threats. While screening can reduce some threats, terrorists are constantly probing and exploiting our weaknesses. FFDOs, along with federal air marshals, act as a chief deterrent, but ultimately, the last line of defense is the federal flight deck officer. Reinforced doors are an important step to slow an attacker and to buy time, but ultimately the armed pilot is the last line of defense in someone taking over the aircraft to be used as a weapon of mass destruction. Let me say that again. The last line of defense is not the secured cockpit door, but the armed pilot behind it. According to estimates by the Airline Pilots Association, federal flight deck officers only cost $15 per flight segment. Currently, FFDOs defend over 100,000 flight segments per month and 1.5 million flight segments per year. Thousands of federal flight deck officers have been certified through the program, despite a budget that hasn't grown since its program's inception. Federal flight deck officers pay many of the expenses out of their own pockets for the privilege and the honor to defend our country from terrorist attack. This year, the Obama administration proposed to half the program, effectively shutting it down. With their proposal of only $12.5 million in funding, the program would not be able to recertify all of the pilots in the program or even maintain its current management structure, and it certainly would not be able to train any new federal flight deck officers. I'm thankful that Chairman Anderholt and Ranking Member Price have restored the funding levels to the same as they were last year at $25.5 million. But level funding means that over 1,000 pilots who have expressed interest in becoming FFDOs cannot be vetted or trained. Also at this funding level, the program can only train a limited number of pilots who have been vetted, and it would take almost 10 years to process the current backlog, to say nothing of future pilots who may volunteer for the program. With the coming mandatory retirement of many pilots at the age 65, and with combination of fewer new FFDOs coming online, the program will not provide the same level of deterrence. I'd like to reiterate that the increased funding for the program will not come at the greater expense to taxpayers, and the increase to this amendment of $10 million is fully offset. For only $15 per flight, federal flight deck officers provide the most cost-effective aviation security program in existence. As a former federal flight deck officer myself, I can personally testify about the sacrifices and expenses pilots undergo to participate in the program. They actually pay to protect and defend the nation. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, we accept the amendment.
So recognized. And gentleman from Texas yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment. It increases funding for the Federal Flight Deck Officers Program. But the bill already greatly increases this program above the request, 50% above the request, returning the program to its 2012 level. And it's not a harmless offset. On the contrary, aviation management is already cut by $20 million in this bill, and we can ill afford to cut it further. So this is an unnecessary and unwise trade-off, and I urge rejection of the amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition on this amendment? For the purpose of the gentleman from Michigan rise.
Mr. Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I actually would like to, at this time, yield to the gentleman from Minnesota.
Gentleman from Minnesota is...
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, over 700 pilots have been vetted and not trained. 1,500 pilots have been applied for the program but not have yet been vetted. Costs cost about $6,000 per pilot to put them through the backlog for check and training. At current funding at $25.5 million, they're only to bring about 250 new pilots per year on board, which leaves them in less than a status quo status, probably declining once the age of 65 hits many of the pilots in backlog. Funding is the bottleneck rather than the training center capacity. $10 million would not clear the backlog that currently exists. It would be a good start, though. The proposal to reduce the funding for screening and maintenance and screener PC and B by $5 million each. We have strong approval of many organizations for this program, including the Airline Pilots Association. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the most valuable programs and deterrents that is in the air at current time. It costs, once again, $15 per flight to protect the American traveling public. To me, Mr. Speaker, this is a no-brainer. And thank you, and I will yield back.
Well, and I would like to commend my friend, my freshman colleague from Minnesota for offering this amendment and commend him for his service to our country in the military and then what he's been doing. And I think it's a valuable lesson, having been there in that cockpit yourself, dealing with this program, and I support this amendment as well. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion? Then the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Minnesota. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Gentleman, for what purpose the gentlelady from Texas rise?
Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk, and I would ask unanimous consent that my amendment be considered out of order.
Would the gentlelady specify which amendment?
The amendment is on page 15. It's amendment number designated 400.
Is there objection to considering the amendment? Not. The clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas, page 15, line 23, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $61 million. Page 20, line 6, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $50 million.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I thank the chairman of the subcommittee for his courtesies and the ranking member for their courtesies. I am the ranking member on the Transportation Security Committee and have had the privilege of serving as the chairperson of that committee. I now work with the chairperson, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the issues of our committee as it relates to the present appropriations. I think we can all be reminded of a number of incidents starting with 9/11 and the attack on the nation's aviation and the nation's soul. During that time, we did not have the structure of federal air marshals that we have today. We can be reminded of the shoe bomber, the Christmas Day bomber, the issue of the pilot that caused a disturbance some weeks and months ago. We know that the idea of aviation security is crucial. In the course of that, we have developed a very important system called the Federal Air Marshal System. If you would query much of the traveling public, whether they're domestic or international, they would say yes to more federal air marshals, and I agree. I've offered amendments in legislation to require more federal air marshals on international trips, and certainly have encouraged the training and utilization of FAMs on domestic trips. I have visited their offices. I've sat down and spoken to them. They are committed and dedicated public servants. My amendment will restore the Federal Air Marshal's FAMS budget by $50 million. As you're aware, FAMS is an integral program to the Homeland Security mission. I believe that this recommendation takes into consideration the crucial operational challenges FAMS will face as a result of a reduction. The FAMS risk-based concept of operations, CONOPS, outlines the two constraints that impact its optimal allocation of flight coverage. First, FAMS is, of course, dependent on the number of Federal Air Marshals available. Secondly, FAMS flight coverage is reliant on the mission travel budget, which covers all FAM travel expenses, including hotel and per diem costs. With the large cost difference between domestic and international flight operations or missions, CONOPS must be utilized to conduct the most optimal mission allocation that can be maintained within those limitations. In deciding the FAMS appropriation, the House must take into consideration FAM's plan to extend its current hiring freeze in FY 2013 as mandated by the President's budget. It plans to be cooperative. With limited employees, if the proposed $50 million reduction were to be implemented, FAM's operation would be severely undermined. I would venture to say they would be shut down to a great extent. The program would be forced to extend the hiring freeze to include civilian personnel, implement a furlough of all FAMS personnel for a minimum of 4 days, reduce mission coverage, assess which offices can be shut down, and consider a reduction in force or RIF to strategically reduce onboard staffing levels. This is not the time to do this in the course of franchise terrorism. In addition, FAMS will suffer a significant decline in critical operational programs, including travel, information, technology, logistical support. A reduction would be an obstruction to the good work and progress of this program. For these reasons, I encourage my colleagues to look closely at the devastation of the loss of these dollars and ask you to restore the $50 million to the FAMS budget. I reserve my time.
The gentlelady may not reserve, but she can yield back.
I would ask my colleagues to consider this amendment, and I would ask that we include or recognize FAMS as an integral part of a homeland security, a nation security, frontline security, and an important point and program to consider funding necessary to ensure the security of the traveling public and the nation's homeland. With that, I ask support of the Jackson-Lee Amendment, and I do yield back at this time.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Alabama? Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to reluctantly oppose the amendment. While the Federal Air Marshal Service, known as FAMS, does and certainly will continue to provide an additional layer in aviation security, the committee saw an opportunity in this bill to strike a balance and achieve some savings in a program that before this year had been growing rapidly. FAMS deployment surged following the 9/11 attacks and again following the 2009 Christmas Day bombing attempt. Exactly how they are deployed and how many there are cannot be discussed in open session. However, it is possible to note that many other security measures have been put into place since both of those events took place. Intensified screening, new and more capable intelligence, information sharing, a more secure cockpit, and the expansion of the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program are examples of steps taken to secure aviation that reduce the need to rely on FAMS on routes that do not represent the highest threat potential. The bill takes these security improvements into account and focuses on funding to cover the top priority routes based on threat, whether domestic or whether they're international. The bill also fully funds the FFDO program, which complements FAMS and in some cases is the only security element on board. In addition, the report directs TSA and the FAMS to look again at how to include other federal law enforcement agents working with them. This amendment, while I believe it is well-intentioned, would sustain funding to lower priority flights at the expense of other security measures that offer more immediate security impacts. The committee report calls for FAMS to brief the committee within 60 days on its optimal mix of staffing, scheduling, and recommendations for any regulatory or legislative actions needed to improve FAMS operation. I believe the bill will support a robust and a targeted FALMS mission, and I look forward to moving forward with a more focused and effective posture in aviation security. Therefore, I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For up to the gentleman, North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I happy to yield to Ms. Jackson-Lee for a response.
I thank the distinguished ranking member, and I really thank the chairman for his comments. And I don't want to give a whole historical perspective, but I've certainly been on the Homeland Security Authorizing Committee since 9/11. I'm quite familiar with the technologies and various changes in aviation travel in particular, and we've made great strides. We have certainly made great strides. But here's my point that I think is crucial. How long are we going to continue to count on heroic, if you will, passengers and continue to cite them as great heroes until the day of some tragic and horrific incident? We thank the American traveling public for what it has done to thwart a number of incidences, some of which obviously are not terrorist-directed, but they do impact on the traveling public's security while airborne. Air marshals are frontline support and defense in a vessel, if you will, and an aircraft that, if tampered with airborne, can be a catastrophe of enormous proportions. Air marshals are, in essence, a crucial part of the security of this nation. And if we are to literally obliterate by the $50 million reduction, you will see a reduction in mission, what offices will be ultimately shut down, FAMS personnel being furloughed for a minimum of 4 days, civilian personnel gone. I don't deny that we can look to be responsible fiscally and that we can find ways that will streamline. I happen to believe the $50 million is too drastic a cut and should be restored. And so I'd ask my colleagues, in spite of what changes may have been made, they do not act superior to that human resource on that aircraft that is standing in the gap for a dastardly, devastating terrorist act or some other altercation that needs the resources and expertise of the Federal Air Marshals. Let me conclude by saying, for a very long time, I've introduced legislation to give flight attendants the kind of security training that would help them in the course of a potential terrorist incident on the aircraft. We hope that that would have already been borrowed. I believe the other frontliners are TSO officers. But that flight training has not yet occurred. So Federal Air Marshals act in the capacity of that standing in the gap to secure the crew and as well to secure the traveling public. Who wants to subject the traveling public, domestic or international, to that kind of gaping hole of the reduction of cost or dollars that would ultimately result in this huge reduction of mission, furloughs, loss of civilian, closed offices? I think that we need to reconsider, and I'd ask my colleagues to support this amendment of adding back the $50 million reduction that has taken place. I thank the gentleman from North Carolina for his wonderful courtesies, and again, I ask my colleague, and I yield back to the gentleman.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. And pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas will be postponed. Clerk will read.
Page 19, line 6, Transportation Threat Assessment and Credentialing, $192,424,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2014. Transportation Security Support, $928,663,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2014. Federal Air Marshals, $879,600,000. United States Coast Guard operating expenses, $6,759,627,000.
Mr. Chairman. The gentleman from Illinois rise.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Dold of Illinois. Page 21, line 1, after the first dollar amount, insert increase by $5,200,000. Page 22, line 14, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $5,200,000.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for their leadership on this legislation, and I want to thank the staff for working with me on this amendment. Mr. Chairman, my amendment increases the Coast Guard operating expenses by $5.2 million to address search and rescue capabilities in the Great Lakes region. Search and rescue is one of the Coast Guard's oldest missions, dating back to the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service that was founded in 1790. Today, Coast Guard search and rescue response involves multi-mission stations, cutters, aircrafts, and boats linked by communication networks that also include over 5,000 commercial vessels that provide a voluntary global response force. Using these assets in the past year, the Coast Guard has responded to over 6,468 search and rescue cases, assisting over 10,000 people and saving over 1,400 lives. Just last week, Mr. Chairman, 2 young women were saved by the Coast Guard air assets on Lake Michigan. Unlike the President's budget that makes dramatic cuts to critical search and rescue operations, this amendment would increase our nation's search and rescue capabilities by adding funding for needed assets vital to life-saving capabilities. Mr. Chairman, these investments build on previous investments that specifically increase capability in the Great Lakes to include the installation of Rescue 21 this past December. Rescue 21 is now standing watch on over 42,000 miles of coastline, improving the Coast Guard's ability to assist mariners in distress and save lives and property. Further, by the end of this fiscal year, the Coast Guard will have delivered the last of 3 new long-range response boats to the Great Lakes area and will enhance response capabilities. Mr. Chairman, the Great Lakes is one of the most popular recreation areas in our country, and the Coast Guard is a vital part of making it safe for thousands each year. We can't stand by and allow the administration to eliminate life-saving efforts on our Great Lakes. I certainly urge support for this amendment, and I do want to yield the remaining time I have to my good friend, the gentleman from Michigan, who has been instrumental in assisting me in this amendment, Mr. Huizenga.
Well, and I thank my good friend from Illinois for yielding. And we, Mr. Chairman, not only serve on the Financial Services Committee together, we also share a Great Lake. Michigan is uniquely situated, literally bordering all 5 of the Great Lakes: Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, Lake St. Clair, Lake Ontario. And 4 of those are actually international boundary waters with thousands of miles of shoreline that are on there, dozens of ports throughout the Great Lakes, and I might add that they are aptly served by the District 9 commander out of Cleveland, as he is juggling all of the various assets that the Coast Guard has. But I do reject the plans by this administration to decrease the search and rescue capabilities in the Great Lakes. This vital amendment restores funding in order to maintain the level of capability that has been present in the Great Lakes for many years, and it's been much needed, Mr. Chairman. As the gentleman noted, these funds combined with offsets in this bill address shortfalls that this administration has actually advocated for. So Coast Guard search and rescue in all of the Great Lakes cannot be shortchanged. And as we see an example after example, whether it be by boat or by helicopter in Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake St. Clair, Lake Ontario, some of the busiest boating traffic, recreational as well as commercial traffic that we see anywhere in the world concentrated in that area. And I urge a yes vote on this amendment and yield back the balance of my time to the gentleman.
And I thank the gentleman for his help. I do urge my colleagues to support this amendment. It is common sense legislation. We cannot afford to have search and rescue capabilities be diminished. It certainly, as we look at the number of recreational boaters, it's a vital part of making sure that we're saving lives in the Great Lakes region.
Would the gentleman yield?
I certainly shall yield to the chairman.
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman, I would want to commend the gentleman from Illinois and from Michigan for their commitment for search and rescue, and we would gladly accept their amendment. I yield back.
I yield back.
Gentleman from Illinois yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed. For what purpose the gentleman from Alaska rise?
I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
At this time, I'd like to engage with the distinguished chairman for a colloquy regarding the Polar Sea, the Coast Guard's second heavy icebreaker.
Does the gentleman yield time?
I yield back to you, Mr. Addo.
Okay. Yield to me? Okay. At this time, I'd like to yield my time to the gentleman for Alaska for the purpose of moving forward with the colloquy.
Mr. Chairman, again, thank you, and there may be some confusion here, but we've talked about this. I rise today in regards to the Coast Guard icebreaker Polar Sea. It has been decommissioned, will soon be put in dry dock to be prepared for scrapping. However, I believe that before a resale value of the Polar Sea is significantly reduced by removing its propeller and shafts, that the Coast Guard must consider other options. To date, the Coast Guard has not yet officially surveyed the private sector for interest in the Polar Sea in its current condition. Private sector interest in the Polar Sea may increase after this summer's Arctic drilling season, when permitted drilling is expected to be shortened due to heavy ice in the far north. My good friend from Washington, Mr. Dix, and I are offering this colloquy to delay the scrapping. Our goal is to specifically instruct the Coast Guard to provide a survey of whether or not there's a better use for this vessel. I was prepared to offer an amendment today that would direct the Coast Guard to report back to Congress on the condition of the Polar Sea, the costs associated with reactivating the vessel for service, and the interest of private or public entities in purchasing and operating the Polar Sea. This amendment would have prevented the Coast Guard from removing any major equipment or systems from the Polar Sea until the Coast Guard submitted its report to Congress. Unfortunately, the amendment is subject to a point of order, but I'd ask the chairman for his support and commitment to work with me and Mr. Dix on this important issue as we pursue the alternative legislative fix in the Transportation Committee. Time is in essence. I'd like to now yield to my good friend from Washington, Mr. Dix.
I thank my good friend from Alaska for yielding, and I thank the gentleman for raising this important issue. The dramatic reduction in the Arctic sea ice that is happening at the North Pole is leading to substantial growth in activity in the Arctic region. The Coast Guard in the high latitude study determined that it needs a minimum of 3 heavy and 3 medium icebreakers to meet its statutory mission. This bill includes funding to start the design phase of a new heavy icebreaker. However, it will not enter service until 2020 at the earliest. Until then, there will be only 1 heavy icebreaker, the Polar Star, and 1 medium icebreaker in operation. This is clearly not enough for the Coast Guard to accomplish its mission, and given the age of the Polar Star, which entered service in the 1970s, the possibility of a breakdown or extended maintenance period is significant, which would leave us without any serviceable heavy icebreaker at all. As my friend has noted, the Polar Sea, the Coast Guard's second heavy icebreaker, has been decommissioned and is awaiting the final orders to scrap it. Given our rapidly growing need in the polar region, I worry that the Coast Guard is not considering other options for the Polar Sea. Personally, I think a compelling case can be made for directing the Coast Guard to make the investment and put it back into service. But at the very least, the Coast Guard needs to take time to review alternatives. In my judgment, it would be a shame to scrap such a potentially useful asset when there is so much evidence before us that we need more immediate ice-breaking capacity. My friend from Alaska has noted that he and I had been considering working on language that would direct the Coast Guard to consider alternatives, but that such an amendment would be subject to a point of order. I'm glad the gentleman will be able to work on the issue on a bill pending before the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I want to indicate to him that I share his commitment to ensuring that the nation's ice-breaking needs are met, and will continue to work with him to ensure that the Coast Guard considers all available options for the Polar Sea. I yield back to the gentleman from Alaska. I yield back to the chairman, Mr. Adderholt.
No, he yields to me, and I yield to him.
Thank you. Mr. Young, I understand the concerns of my colleagues from the state of Washington and from the state of Alaska, and I appreciate them calling this attention to the subcommittee. It is important to keep the vessel intact. The subcommittee agrees with this important goal, and I would urge the Coast Guard to work with the authorizing committee to accomplish this assessment.
I thank for the understanding of the chairman and the ranking member of the full committee. This is important to our nation, especially Alaska, and I do appreciate your consideration. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Gardner of Colorado, page 21, line 24. Insert before the period at the end the following. Provided further that of the funds made available under this heading, such sums as may be necessary shall be available to the Secretary of Homeland Security to comply with the Coast Guard's energy management requirements under Section 543F7 of the National Energy Conservation Policy Act, 42 U.S.C. 8253F7.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment, which I am offering along with my colleague Mr. Welch from Vermont, addresses an important issue relating to Coast Guard facilities. We've offered this same amendment to the two other appropriations bills this week, and they've passed by voice vote. And while my colleague from Vermont is not here this evening, I want to commend him for his hard work on these amendments and energy savings performance contracts in general. I think the passage of these amendments sends a clear signal that Congress understands the importance of saving energy and therefore saving costs for the federal government. This amendment does one simple thing. It says that the Coast Guard should provide an inventory of ways to improve efficiencies in their buildings, which is already a directive under current law. Under current law, energy savings performance contracts, or ESPCs, are provided as a mechanism for private companies to come into federal buildings and make energy efficiency upgrades. ESPCs result in savings for the federal government and create well-paying private sector jobs at no cost to taxpayers. It creates a win-win situation, reducing debt and creating jobs. The private sector company must guarantee that project improvements will produce energy savings sufficient to pay for the project. In this fiscal climate, there is no reason we shouldn't be helping the federal buildings find ways to save money and upgrade federal buildings with cleaner and more efficient facilities. I urge adoption of this amendment, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Alabama.
Strike the last word.
It's recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we accept the gentleman from Colorado's amendment, and we appreciate him bringing this to the subcommittee's attention. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Any other discussion? Questions then on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed. The clerk will read.
Page 22, line 1, Environmental Compliance and Restoration, $12,151,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2017. Reserve Training, $115,528,000. Automation Modernization, $50 million to remain available until September 30th, 2015. Acquisition, Construction, and Improvements, $1,428,593,000, of which $938 million shall be available until September 30th, 2017. Research, Development, Test, and Evaluation, $19,690,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2017. Retired Pay, $1,423,000,000. United States Secret Service Salaries and Expenses, $1,556,055,000. Acquisition, construction, and improvements, $56,750,000, of which $4,430,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2017. Title III, Protection, Preparedness, Response, and Recovery, National Protection and Programs Directorate, Management and Administration, $45,321,000. Infrastructure Protection and Information Security, $1,110,430,000, of which $200 million shall remain available until September 30th, 2014. Federal Protective Service, revenues and collections credited to this account shall be available until expended for expenses related to the protection of federally owned buildings. Office of Biometric Identity Management, $191,380,000. Office of Health Affairs, $132,003,000. Federal Emergency Management Agency, salaries and expenses, $712,565,000. Automation Modernization, $58,048,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2015. State and local programs, including transfer of funds, $1,762,589,000.
For what purpose the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I have an amendment of the desk designated as number 2.
Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Flake of Arizona. Page 37, line 18, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $412,908,000. Page 99, line 17, after the dollar
Ask
amount.
unanimous consent that the reading be
Mr. Chairman,
Without objection?
we
Is there
do not have a
objection?
copy of the amendment.
Does the gentleman object to the suspension of the reading?
Yes, we
go ahead.
We need to have a
Insert
copy of the
increased by
amendment.
$412,908,000.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair. I'm sorry.
Would the
Mr.
gentleman
Chairman.
suspend?
Mr. Chairman,
Can we get a
if
copy
we could
to the
suspend, we need
minority?
a copy of the amendment. Thank you.
Gentleman from Arizona is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I apologize that my objecting to the reading took longer than the reading. But we'll try to get through this quickly. This amendment is straightforward. It would simply reduce the amount appropriated for state and local programs in the bill by $412 million, making the amount available for the Homeland Security grants consistent with FY 2012 levels. I understand that that some of these are popular programs, and I'm under no delusions about the prospect of this amendment. But I also understand that these programs were cut heavily last year in the fiscal year 2012 Homeland Security Appropriation Bill, when it was reported out of the committee with $1.3 billion cut from the previous year and a funding level $2.8 billion less than the President's request. By comparison, this $412 million cut looks a bit chintzy. There are good reasons for them. Aside from the moment, setting aside the steep financial precipice that we find ourselves on, and we're still on, there are some problems with these programs that led to them being cut last year. According to the House Appropriations report from 2012, quote, reductions were due to the persistent lack of quantifiable metrics that could measure the additional capacity that our nation has gained for the billions of dollars that have been invested in these grant programs. In other words, we don't have good metrics to actually determine if this money is being spent well or not. The report continues, based on the latest estimate, the Department currently has about $13 billion in previously appropriated funds that remain unspent, dating back to FY 2005. Quote, this level of unexpected balances is unacceptable. That's what the report reads. Mr. Chairman, the House Committee on Appropriations approved this bill and the report which accompanies it just less than 1 year ago. And when it did, it appropriated only $1 billion for these programs. While the conference report increased that to $1.34 billion today, we're preparing to approve a bill that appropriates more than $750,000 more than the House thought appropriate last year. For these programs, the House heavily criticized, these programs, I should mention, were heavily criticized last year, and here we are with this massive increase. What dent has been made in the $13 billion in unspent funds that existed less than 1 year ago? The criticisms levied by the House against these programs had been echoed by GAO as well. In 2009, GAO found that, quote, FEMA's assessments do not provide a means to measure the effective UASI regions projects that they've had on building regional preparedness capabilities, which is the goal of the program. Taxpayers have footed the bill for tens of billions of dollars in grants to states and localities with no clear way of telling how the money has improved readiness or national security. In fact, it remains difficult for any member of Congress to even know what these funds are being spent on. We've got to do better than this. When we don't get good reports back as to how the money is being spent, how can we ensure that additional monies like this is going to be spent in an appropriate manner? I'm certain that my colleagues want to ensure that money is spent well. That's why I think we should simply forego spending this additional amount. That's what this amendment is intended to do. This amendment would simply reduce the amount appropriated by $412 million, making it level with 2012 funding levels. Again, we have got to start cutting spending somewhere. And when we increase spending on programs like this, where we don't get good information from the agencies that spend it as to whether or not it's doing the good that was intended to do, then I say this is an area that we should cut. So with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of Mr. Flake's amendment. In fact, he beat me to the microphone because I had intended to introduce the same amendment that Mr. Flake is presenting to us now. But I'd like to say that this amendment of Mr. Flake's will keep funding state and local programs that fall under FEMA set at those 2012 levels. It does not affect disaster assistance, only state and local programs. Mr. Chairman, our nation is broke, and many agencies, along with entire branches of the federal government, are experiencing drastic cutbacks. Yet as it stands, the underlying bill increases funding for state and local FEMA programs by more than $400 million. While I'm well aware that FEMA provides necessary support for various grant and training programs, I'm also a firm believer that these would be better regulated solely by state and local governments, not by the federal government. Therefore, I feel it is more than reasonable to ask that for right now, particularly while we are in such a crisis economically as a nation, that we simply freeze funding for these programs at the 2012 level. So I congratulate my friend from Arizona, Mr. Flake, for his amendment, and I heartily support it. I congratulate him on his long-standing efforts to bring the federal government into fiscal sanity, and I urge support of this amendment. Now yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition.
I move to strike the last words.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment. This amendment would decimate the funding for our FEMA Homeland Security grants. And by that I mean the state and local grants on which our communities depend. I mean the transit and rail grants that we've heard so much about in this evening's debate. I mean the port security grants. I mean the UWASI grants, the urban area grants that are risk-based and targeted to the areas in this country that are under the greatest risk, and other programs that of smaller size. These programs have helped keep our communities safe. After all, Our first responders are not at the federal level. Our first responders are at home. And our states and our local communities are on the front lines of responding and preparing to respond, mitigating, and then dealing with disasters. Disasters of terrorist attacks, natural disasters, other major emergencies. This amendment would return to the 2012 funding levels, which were greatly reduced from previous year funding levels. In fact, the levels in 2012 were at an all-time low and were widely decried by our states and localities. And so this year we've begun in this bill to build those funding levels where they need to be, and this amendment would wipe all that out at a single stroke. The offerer of this amendment has made a great deal of the pace of the spending on these grant programs. I have to say that the figures cited tonight are misleading in the sense that these are multi-year programs. They're often dealing with large construction projects. All of this money, except the money for the current year, all of this money is obligated. It's not just sitting there. The money's obligated, and of course, after the projects are completed, the full amount will be registered as spent. And so we need to oversee these programs carefully. We need to make sure that they're being administered in a responsible way. We need to exercise careful oversight. But the notion that we would come in and wipe out with a single amendment the progress we've made in getting these funds back to a level that will give our communities and states the support they need, I think is unthinkable. I hope this body will reject this amendment. And I yield back. I'll be happy to yield.
I would just like to associate myself with the gentleman's remarks. I feel these programs are very important, that there have been major cuts made in the last 2 years, as I understand it, and that this would just be another major cut on top of this. And to my friend from Georgia, austerity isn't helping England, isn't helping France, isn't helping Greece, and it's not going to help the United States. We need a recovery here at home. That's what we need, not mindless cutting and slashing of the budget that will throw people out of work and not create jobs for the American people. Austerity has failed, and I think it's time for the majority to wake up and recognize that. And I don't have the time, or I'd be delighted.
I'll be happy to yield.
Thank my friend from North Carolina for yielding. Just to remark about Mr. Chairman, from my friend from Washington State's remark. The countries in Europe are failing because they spend too much money. Government does not make jobs. It's the private sector that makes jobs. Republicans have passed bill after bill after bill here in the House that Harry Reid throws in the trash can as soon as they get over to the Senate. We've passed bills here that would lower the cost of gasoline and oil. Natural gas, of course, is very low because of the amount that we have, and it's gone down because the marketplace works, and we need to develop our God-given resources to lower the cost of gasoline. It's hurting our...
Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thanks for yielding.
We are talking here about state and local grant programs whereby the federal government shares in emergency preparedness and response virtually without dissent in our communities that this funding is needed. Now, yield back.
Gentleman from Alabama, raise. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, well, we rise also to oppose the amendment as well. We have concerns about the cuts in funding as well. So I wanted to go on record that we do have concerns about this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question. We're prepared. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. And the amendment is not agreed. The secretary or the clerk, for what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Ms. Hahn of California, page 37, line 18, after the dollar amount, insert increase by $75 million. Page 55, line 2, after the dollar amount, insert reduce by $75 million. Page 55, line 4, after the dollar amount, insert reduce by $75 million.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would increase funding for port security grants by $75 million. You know, I came to Congress to really bring the issue of our ports into our national dialogue and how important they are to our economy, to our jobs, to our national security. And I've been the co-founder with my friend Ted Poe of the Congressional Ports Caucus. And as a representative of a district that borders one of the largest ports in the country, this issue is very important to me. The lessons of 9/11 has taught us that we must continuously be vigilant in proactively seeking out and preventing our country's most pressing threats. The Port Security Grant Program helps address these threats by providing key funding to port areas for enhancing maritime security. We have millions of tons of cargo shipments coming into ports across this country, and they provide viable entry points for terrorists who seek to use weapons of mass destruction. When people ask me what keeps me up at night, it's the thought of what could happen at one of our ports and what that would mean not only to our national economy, but to the global economy. An attack at our nation's ports could severely damage our own fragile economy right now and cause a ripple effect across the global supply chain. This requires us to take proactive steps and invest in critical detection and response operations and equipment. Each year, port security officials attempt to address these many threats that exist at our nation's ports by applying for these port security grants. Unfortunately, the irresponsible cuts to preparedness grants this last year resulted in huge gaps being left unaddressed and security officials unable to build and sustain capabilities needed to prevent, detect, respond to, and recover from a potential attack. While I commend the chairman and ranking members' efforts in bolstering funding for state and local homeland security programs this year, this amendment will ensure that the ports receive the funding they need in order to address the lingering gaps in port security, of which there are many. And even though I understand the intended purpose of the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, the reality is that this facility was appropriated $75 million even though the President did not need nor request these funds. Additionally, Department of Homeland Security is still waiting for the recommended design modifications made by the National Academy of Science and for the administration to review the cost and scope of this project, which isn't anticipated to be completed until 2020. I think this money could be better spent on providing critical support for our American ports and inland waterway system, which is provided through this Port Security Grant Program. I have no doubt that all of us recognize the urgency of this threat and the importance of having safe and secure maritime facilities in order to protect our critical borders, moving goods, and our American citizens. Therefore, I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the amendment. As I had mentioned earlier in the evening, our nation does have an immediate need to build up our research capacity into pathogens that afflict animals in our food chain and, by extension, human beings. This amendment would put that to risk, and therefore I would oppose the amendment, but I'd also like to yield my time to the gentlelady from Kansas and have her to speak on this amendment as well.
Gentlelady from Kansas, recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. DHS, under both the Bush and Obama administration, has made it clear that a BSL-4 lab is essential to our national security, and building a new structure to host the National Bio and Agri-Defense Facility is both responsible and cost-effective. Manhattan, Kansas was selected as a new site for NBAF after an exhaustive study by the Bush administration's DHS and then reconfirmed by the current administration's 2012 budget. We need NBAF, and Manhattan is best placed to build it, a fact that Secretary Napolitano confirmed earlier this year in a hearing with the Appropriations Committee. While FEMA state and local grants are important, increasing them by eliminating the funding for construction of this lab is simply irresponsible. Make no mistake about it, if we had a surplus, it might be nice to increase these grants, but the result of this amendment will be stopping or delaying construction of the nationally important NBAF facility and jeopardizing the security of our nation's food supply. I urge the body to reject this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Alabama.
We oppose the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Alabama yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I hope that we've established in the course of this discussion tonight that I and our side of the aisle is strongly in favor of the FEMA grants, and that most certainly includes the port grants. So I commend our colleague for calling our attention to the importance of these port security grants and the need for more funding, although in this bill we have begun the way back in terms of restoring funding for the state and local grants and the port grants and the rail and transit grants and the UASI high-risk area grants. We're not there yet, and so our colleague has made a constructive suggestion as to how we might augment this funding. I do feel obligated, though, to make a comment about the proposed offset. Our colleague has made some very cogent points about the NBAF project. I believe that with the funding that's already in the pipeline and the National Academy of Science reviews that are underway, that we do not need to include money in this year's bill for NBAF construction. But this is part of the science and technology account. And we're going to have later this evening an amendment from our colleague from New York that will suggest taking the NBAF designated funding and restoring it to the science and technology account. And I have to say that that science and technology account is very much in need of that funding. Science and technology research activities have been drastically and unwisely cut in recent years. They've been cut by 60% over the past 2 years. Now, there's a $158 million increase in this bill that restores some of these cuts. But that's taking place against a baseline that was simply too low to meet the needs of the different homeland security components and the needs of our nation. So in weighing the equities here, as we said earlier, we have one compelling need, and we also have an offset that raises some serious issues. And we will have an occasion later this evening to talk about the science and technology account and the place of NBAF within that account. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the Hahn Amendment, which strikes a dagger in our efforts to protect our country, our homeland security, from threats to our food system, our agriculture system, and our threats to the American people. As horrific as it is to imagine, reports show that one of our greatest vulnerabilities is threats to our food supply, to our agriculture. One doesn't have to stretch too far to think how mad cow disease or some other viral spread could grind our economy to a halt and strike fear in the hearts of all Americans. This simply cannot happen. And the Hahn Amendment, which completely defunds 100% of the National Bio and Agri-Defense Facility in this year's appropriations bill, would completely set us back, would make us very vulnerable to threats to our agricultural system from foreign-born illness and those terrorists that would seek to injure and strike fear in the hearts of Americans. Currently, our country lacks a biosafety level 4 lab needed to keep our food supply safe. Both Secretary Vilsack, Secretary Napolitano have stated that this is a priority, and it has bipartisan support within the administration. Both Presidents Bush and both Presidents Obama have supported it. Homeland security is not a partisan issue. We are here today to do what we can to protect the American people. I want to commend the chairman and the committee for their work in ensuring that the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility was properly funded and that we can move forward and can continue to protect ourselves from terrorists around the world. I can assure us here today that terrorists are not sleeping. They are not waiting for this committee to debate. They are not waiting for conference committees. They are doing everything they can to strike fear in the hearts of Americans and to disrupt our food supply. And this weakness is something we cannot continue to let go by. And that's why I stand strongly against the Hahn Amendment. It's dangerous for our national security. It's dangerous for the American people. And I ask the body to reject it this evening. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. Those in favor say aye. Opposed say